I knew Iron Man sucked as a character, and everybody made fun of him, and he wasn't any good when I was growing up. But I knew if one day they were going to make a badass Iron Man movie, you cannot make a badass Aquaman movie.
You totally can. You totally can.
No. Does he have to be underwater?
Yeah.
Then you can't make a good Aquaman movie.
Fantastic Four. Spider-Man. Iron Man. Spider-Woman.
Following program has adult language and plenty of spoilers. Listener, be advised.
The Marvel Superhero Podcast.
Diablo Frank.
The Legal Machine.
Mr. Fix-It.
The movie slate, both Marvel and DC Comics.
One of the obvious matches would be the former Captain Marvel, now Shazam, against Thor, since they're both magic-based superheroes. But Thor's already had 2 movies. It's not really a fair competition. So, Inhumans versus Shazam.
Ooh. So the
What do you know about Shazam?
The Rock will carry the movie in Shazam. Now I watched Black Adam movie just for the fact that he is your anti-hero. He's the Punisher type-ish character where he's
Namor. He's evil Namor. With more powers.
Yeah, that's a better comparison. Way better comparison. Because I actually remember reading the story arc where he took over the country and he's committing,
Kahndaq, where he decided, which country? He ran one country, and then another country blew up his royal family, so he killed with his own hands everybody in the country that went up against him. Because wasn't he in Kahndaq and he killed everybody in Kwarak or something like that?
I gotta read this shit. I didn't read that.
You weren't aware of that?
No.
No, what had happened is...
Make that movie.
Black Adam is Egyptian, but he is from a particular Middle Eastern country set up in the comics, and I think he was the
first. Well, he was supposed to be the first hero, right? But he went
went rogue and he was sent off to exile. Black Adam is so your kind of character in the DC universe.
Well, no. But my point being is Shazam. What I've always seen of him is the uber Boy Scout of Superman, where Superman's a Boy Scout and he's uber. Because let's be honest, he's what, a 10-year-old or 12-year-old in the body of Superman. So he's going to be like, gee willikers. So that's really...
That's a portrayal.
No.
It's one of those situations...
That's my point is, now we do a movie now. So he's going to be a tweeting, Facebook reading kid who has the power of Superman.
Well, and he's also got a shitty attitude. They've been playing him as being a kind of a brat in the modern New 52.
You got that, and then you got...
And also, this will not be part of the DC cinematic universe. My understanding is it will be a standalone.
Oh, great, like Green Lantern or Jonah Hex or all those other fantastic
Well, I'm pretty sure
films.
Green Lantern was intended to be part of a cinematic universe that was aborted because they didn't do very well.
And then you're talking about Inhumans, which, again, a lot of potential. You got all these fucked up looking creatures that have all these weird powers, and then...
And you really liked the Jenkins J. Lee series, right?
Yeah, I did. I love the society, the way it's structured, where when the gas hits you, if you don't turn into an Inhuman, then you're a subhuman, and you're in the basement cleaning, and you're basically slave labor. I find that for such an evolved race, they'll have slaves. Like that was just... I remember reading it thinking, God, that's so really fucked up for a book. Now I don't think Marvel's gonna go there. I mean, it's not gonna be a 12 years of slave type story to it, but
12 years of Karnak.
Do you know what's going on with the Inhumans?
They're basically making the Inhumans the X-Men.
Marvel wants their own mutants. They're never going to get the X-Men back from Fox.
And they're doing some fucked up mind games with people to do this. Not marketing X-Men toys, not pushing the books.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of awesome.
You like that, huh? Well, because you spent the 90s suffering through X-Men.
Cut off one arm and two shall replace it, or whatever the fuck Hydra's shit is. They're killing X-Men in the comics and toydom to create another. It's just so crazy to me.
That's a strategy that sounds good on paper, but part of the trick is you have to somehow make the Inhumans become as popular as the X-Men. And how the fuck do you do that when you don't have the characters? My understanding is they're even going to do a little twist where they're going to try to say that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch were not Magneto's children, but are in fact pure Inhuman. Is what I'm hearing the rumor is right now.
Nobody cares. So
yeah, I know, right? Nobody
gives a shit.
Scarlet Witch Although the most interest I've had in the cinematic Scarlet Witch so far was during that Marvel special that aired last week where they showed her all in slow-mo pulling a Carrie. And Carrie, as a member of the Avengers, is cool.
True. So...
Did you see that special?
No, I didn't see it. Inhumans is going to work.
You think that's good?
I think Inhumans is going to work.
My understanding, and they've been trying to get this to work in the comics, they wanted to use the Inhumans to create a modern-day superheroic Game of Thrones.
They can do that.
Youngblood. When Rob Liefeld announced Youngblood, where look, they're the government superheroes, but they're also pop icons and celebrities, and so they're compromised because they're trying to be this one thing in public, and then they're doing wet works in the background. Sounds like a fucking awesome comic book, right? And then you read it, and it's written by Rob Liefeld and drawn by Rob Liefeld with the help of his buddy Hank Cannells.
So it was really good.
It was fucking real. Oh. Yeah, it was fucking horrible. I was going into that too as a Rob Liefeld fan, which, I really need to stop admitting that I liked Rob Liefeld, but I did, and I sometimes still do. But that was a terrible book, and it was so terrible that when he collected it, Rob actually had a writer come in and rearrange the pages and rescript everything to try to make it not be terrible. Well, you've got the same problem with the Inhumans. You can say, oh, we want to make it like Game of Thrones all day. Well, if it was as simple as I'm going to do Game of Thrones type shit and that's going to work, everybody would be doing it. Just because you kill random characters doesn't mean you've imbued those characters with enough goodwill from the audience that it matters if that character dies. They can't make you care about... Who gives a fuck about any of the individual Inhumans?
I think Black Bolt is badass.
You like Black Bolt? The guy with the tuning fork on his fucking forehead?
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I like the costume. I like that he just sits in that big-ass throne and can't say a fucking word. You're always just waiting for it. Whenever I think Inhumans, I think the Jay Lee stuff.
Well, I'm sure that's the way they're drawing from
That's got to be the way they're going to go. It's just fucking dark. And those characters, they all have the basic Kirby designs, but it's all modern. And
they're not terrible-looking characters. They just looked a little out of place in the 70s.
There's just something about the Inhumans that I've always been kind of fascinated with, and I think it could really work, just like Guardians did, where it's like nobody gives a shit about any of these characters, so we can go whatever direction we want to, but the characters' designs are good. The powers, for the most part, are good. Like, I think Medusa, I think that can work, and I know it's hair, but I think it could work.
I think that hair works. I just talked about how hair was making the difference for me, like in Scarlet Witch in the movies. I could see that working cinematically, but when I was going after hashtag...
And I know, I do realize I was just capping on the ocean. Hair can work. The ocean cannot work.
When I was doing the whole hashtag Frank's Agenda thing, Medusa was one of the characters I looked at because she was in a 1970s trade paperback collection of all the Marvel heroines. And she was actually like almost like front and center. She was one of the main ones they were pointing to because she started out as a villain before the whole Inhuman concept had come together. And then she slowly worked her way into being the queen of the Inhumans. So that sounds like it'd be interesting. But I was looking at it and I don't find her interesting as a character. I don't find any of those characters interesting. I don't think the designs are quite as strong as you say, because you got guys like Karnak, is that the guy's name?
Karnak's dope as
Triton. But like
whatever, yeah.
But Karnak has a cool concept where he can find the flaw in anything and exploit it in terms of combat.
That's what I'm saying.
But visually, he's not that strong, so you'd have to basically redesign him. Triton just is your typical scaled green, stupid water guy.
Check, done.
Gorgon's kind of cool with the hooves, but the rest of him doesn't do much for me.
I'm telling
he's Hercules with hooves.
It works though.
I
think it's gonna work.
So much of Inhumans relies on the execution and not knowing who the principals are in terms of screenplay, direction, casting, anything. Just on paper, I don't feel as strongly about that one. Where Captain Marvel, Shazam is a great concept. If they can do it, and because my understanding
if
is
they're going to play it the full kid turns into Shazam.
DC's been pushing the dark, realistic Shazam in recent years, and he's got this shit costume where he's running around with a hood on and glowing white eyes.
Shut up! Are you serious?
It's fucking terrible.
Oh.
And the kid himself, he's all like a smart alecky, bratty Billy Batson now. It's like, get the fuck out of here with that shit. You think that making him Bart Simpson is going to make a fucking difference? Nobody even likes Bart Simpson anymore.
Yeah, shorts.
It's a fucking tired ass character type. I'd be more impressed if they went wholesome. Shazam's going to be separate from the DC universe continuity. It's going to be its own thing. It's not really part of this whole universe of pictures they're doing right now. It's supposed to stand on its own. And if they get into the magic and the wonder and they make that more kid-friendly, like Big Hero 6, that was not a major Marvel production at all. You know, like in terms of the comics, there's just this Asian skewing team that Sunspot led during a time when X-Men comics were particularly bad. I was listening to NPR the other morning and they introduced it as a Japanese-style manga movie. For some reason, Disney doesn't want to market it as Marvel at all.
There's like a little blurb at the end.
Yeah.
Based on Marvel comics.
They're really hiding that aspect of it. I didn't give a shit about the Marvel property. I wasn't that excited about a Disney movie because I'm not one of these Pixar aficionados. I like them okay, but I'm not too. But the more I hear about it, the more I see about it, the movie actually actually sounds interesting to me. Apparently, all the kids that are part of Big Hero 6, they're all burgeoning scientists. So they're smart kids. They're making these devices for themselves. They're all like inventors. So it's not one of these things where you've got that one kid who's the inventor and then everybody else is normal. They're all seekers. They're all technologically inclined. They're all working together. And the way science actually works, where you get a group of people who are all really intelligent and they all work together to figure out how to make shit that helps society. The big bloated character, do you remember his name?
Nope.
The big balloon guy. That's based on actual science. Their roboticists are saying that they've been trying to find practical applications for robotics. And one thing you can do is if you take the inner framework of the robot and then you encapsulate that in this blown up, inflated body, they could do stuff medically. And that's where they took the idea and put it into this movie. Wow, there's a lot of thought and real science going into this. And it's a very positive approach to getting people into the sciences through this adventure story. That's great. And it's made for kids. And I want superheroes to have that too. They're supposed to be targeted for kids. I like superhero movies that are adult too, again, Suicide Squad, but let the kids have something. So for God's sake, if you're going to make a Shazam movie, even with The Rock, maybe especially with The Rock, since he's such a charismatic individual and he's playing the villain anyway, make it about the kids. Let him have Mr. Talkie Tawny and put Mr. Mind in there and make it fanciful. Let the kids have something that's theirs instead of having to make it part of this great big dark spooky
play up
Batman universe.
The wonderment of the kid who can turn into the superhero. Yeah, I think that works. And it was funny, but before my hot take on this was going to be, I think that Captain Marvel / Shazam would be a fantastic animated movie. Shazam is not going to be a great title for a live action movie.
No, I think it's perfectly fine. So long as it's not like, what was the name of that? Again, I can't believe we're addressing Shaquille O'Neal more than twice in a
Kazam.
Kazam. Okay.
I think that's what. It's not going to work. You can't play up a serious.
Well, don't you have like some sort of audio program that's Shazam now too, like a music recognition program that stole that name?
Yeah. I don't use that one, but yes, in fact, it's the name of an app. Man, that would be such a good animated movie. That really sucks.
Well, I think it'd be cool in live action. It's just got to be more never-ending story and less Kazam or whatever.
Not Kazam. Quit. No, it's Kazam.
Kazam?
You don't have to. It's Kazam. It's not going to be. I don't know. If you try and play Shazam straight, it's not going to work.
I can almost see Shazam being a better movie in 1986 than I can see it in 2017, whatever the fuck, years from now. What am I talking about?
There's some preconceived notions because of just the name alone. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're going to go to Macaroni Grill, you can't go to Macaroni Grill and expect to have this super high-end meal. Mm-hmm. Because the name of the restaurant is Macaroni Grill. Macaroni is what you buy in a box, and you boil some water, or you Easy Mac, and you stick it in a microwave. The name alone, you may go in there and have like the best filet and lobster tail you've ever had in your entire life. And as soon as you get the check and you see how much you paid and you see Macaroni Grill at the top of the check, you'd be like, oh shit, macaroni costs 99 cents in a box. You're not going to get your boys together and go, hey man, let's go see Shazam tonight. You may have
the brand is dinged in a major way.
That's the brand. It's called Shazam, and you can't call it Captain Marvel for obvious reasons. It's going to say Shazam on it. Whereas I think if you put Shazam on an animated movie or a Pixar-styled CG movie,
probably the way they should have gone with Shazam. If they do dark Shazam, it's going to be terrible. If they're not willing to embrace the fanciful aspects of that character, it's not going to work. So ultimately, you end up with Magic Superman.
I'm telling you, it's going to be tough to have an actor on stage say, hey, Shazam, get over here, or you're trying to call for Shazam.
His name isn't Shazam.
I know.
Shazam is the magic word he says when he's calling the lightning. It's supposed to be like, Shazam! Powerful. And instead, it's going to be like, Shazam! Come on, Shazam! Go over there, Shazam! Go fight that bad guy. It doesn't have the oomph.
I'm telling you, it doesn't.
It's the magic word. It's not the name.
I know.
Yeah.
People don't know. And even then, him shouting Shazam for any reason, it's not. People are gonna laugh.
I don't know.
The more we talk about it, the
harder
worse
it gets
sounds.
To support. I know. So, yeah.
So Shazam.
So
Shazam. Okay. The most recent pop culture reference for Shazam is whenever Peter Griffin orgasms, he goes Shazam. That's the last time I heard Shazam.
Oh dear God!
Swear to God.
Oh man, and he probably got it from Gomer Pyle.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of tricky. I mean, the last time that character had any cultural relevance was the 70s, and it wasn't even that big of a show then. It lasted about 3 seasons. The live-action Shazam
didn't know
show.
it existed.
Yeah, and he had a cartoon in the early 80s, but I think that was a flop.
Which sucks because the costume's badass.
It's a great suit. That and
The concept's badass. The kid that turns into a superhero. It's perfect for an animated film.
Let me see if we can turn this into a win. What if he's black? Would it make a difference? Get a black guy in the red suit? Does that make the difference?
No.
You don't think it'll save it?
Wait, Black Lightning's another black character.
No, you get like
You do Black Lightning.
You get the 2019 equivalent of Jaden.
How about this?
Hey,
Stop.
What about the 2019 equivalent of Jaden Smith? And he's Billy Batson. Do you think that could make it work?
As long as it's not Jaden Smith.
Well, no, I'm not talking about Jaden Smith now. I'm talking about Karate Kid era Jaden Smith when he was actually selling his shtick.
Man, this is getting worse. No, I'll tell you what. How about this? How about how about you mix the two? You mix Black Lightning and Shazam. Instead of calling him Shazam, you call him Black Lightning, and you put him in Shazam's costume.
They couldn't do that because I think that Tony Isabella has some small creative claim to the name Black Lightning.
To Black Lightning.
That's one of the reasons why they went with Black Vulcan and Super Friends, because he actually has some sort of participation thing there. So you can just swipe the name out from under him.
I'm trying to help him here, man.
Hey, you'd have a much better Black Lightning if it was just Shazam as a black guy than the actual Black Lightning character. That's another character that I don't care for at all. DC diversity. Let's have a man put on a afro wig and talk street slang, even though he's an educated individual from who's like a school principal or a teacher, if I recall correctly. And he's going to have this rig on his belt where he can shoot sparks at people.
Inhumans, like I said, it's just an unproven story. I'm afraid it's going to be X-Men without mutants. So this is where I'm going to go more DC. I think Shazam has a better chance because it's not part of the DC universe. It's its own. I think The Rock could carry the movie if he
doesn't play a villain in enough movies. The only reason to watch the Doom movie is for him.
Well, no, actually, if you watch him in Faster when he gets out of prison, dude, that movie's so intense. Like the movie's good up to even the ending's pretty solid with Billy Bob Thornton. I own it, dude. I'll own it to you. It's a really good movie. I mean, he is not a nice person in that movie.
I'm going to say Inhumans is going to win.
Yeah, given that we've just discussed Shazam, yeah, Inhumans is probably going to win that particular bout.
Shazam.
It's been 1 week since you looked at me. Cocked your head to the side and said I'm angry. 5 days since you laughed at me, saying get back together, come back and see me. 3 days since the living room. I realized it's all my fault, but couldn't tell you. Yesterday you'd forgiven me, but it'll still be 2 days till I say I'm sorry.
Hold it, now I want to hoodwink. Does it make you stop think? You'll think you're looking at Aquaman. I summon fish to the dish, although I like the chalet Swiss, I like the sushi, cause it's never touch a frying pan. Hot like wasabi when I bust rhyme.
We got an email from an actual email. We usually don't get those. From the Irredeemable Shag of Firestorm fan and the Fire and Water podcast fame saying, "Hey pal, I recently binge listened to 4 episodes of your show, Iron Man is Born, Tiger the Werewoman, Origin of the Hulk, and Ant-Man vs. Aquaman. Previously, I had listened to the first couple episodes and I've got several more downloaded. Just need to find the time to listen. Overall, I enjoy your show. I should really keep a pen and paper handy when listening as I always have things to comment on. Right now, I remember very few of them. Personally, I love the Tony redemption arc in Iron Man from the 1980s. I started reading around 191 and think I stayed through 215. These featured the return of Tony in the original gray armor and the eventual introduction of the Silver Centurion armor, giving us 2 armored heroes at once. Great stuff. Your co-hosts, Mac, I think, position on the Aquaman movie was as juvenile and empty as my argument on Fire and Water against an Earth 2 Aquaman. At least in my case, that was partially staged. I can only hope the same could be said for this argument. In regard to Ant-Man, I'm not prejudging anything Marvel does now, not after the shocking success of Guardians. Operational comment for you. During editing, it sounds like the natural pauses between statements are being cut. The result is a slightly too fast-paced discussion. Just feels a little too rapid to absorb sometimes. Just my 2 cents. Would love to hear y'all jaw about Alpha Flight sometime. I recently dropped all my ongoing DC titles except Aquaman. The only ongoing superhero comics I'm getting now are Daredevil and Hawkeye. I guess that makes me a Marvel guy now. Keep up the great work on the podcast."
Okay, so here we go.
It's hard for me to see taking individual episodes on their own. I think partly because of us being the ones producing them, it's hard for me to go, okay, I'm just going to take it as a buffet. And really, I should be able to see it that way. I should be able to go, okay, you want to listen to an Iron Man one, you want to listen to a Tiger one. It's just weird because it's sort of, for me, like this tapestry. Content from one episode bleeds into the other episodes. So I'm just encouraging you to listen to everything we do, all of it, every single bit of it.
Are we going to talk about Aquaman?
First, let's get a confession from Illegal Machine.
What am I confessing?
That you were in no way staging that argument. It was 100% true to your feelings about the matter.
You mentioned that your argument about Earth 2 Aquaman was partially staged. Mine was not staged at all. So here we go.
His argument against Aquaman literally is as juvenile and as empty as it sounds, but hilarious.
Well, No. It's a juvenile and empty. Sure. Okay, I've been called worse things. That barely even hurts. Okay, so it's damn near a compliment.
Well, and I have to point out too that on the Fire and Water podcast, actually the Who's Who podcast, Rob Kelly wished a whale to be dropped upon you for your comments.
And I totally get that. And look, I understand we have a lot of DC fan listeners. I will say I was as equally, not equally, I threw a lot of shade, as the kids say, at Ant-Man 2. All right, Ant-Man's an Avenger.
Nowhere near as much or as amusingly, though.
I'm an equal opportunity basher. Let's just run through a few things. And I don't want to turn this back, and I don't want to rehash my argument. Okay, if you want to hear it, go listen to the episode.
And if you just listen to the Aquaman titled podcast, you're missing out because Mr. Fixit and I discussed Aquaman in a later episode. We revisited the topic and went a little bit more into detail as far as the continuity and getting the comics and runs that we'd read and such.
You can make the most badass trailer ever, and it's still going to end with the word Aquaman on it. That's a real difficult hurdle to get over. Because I think that the name Aquaman is hurt. He's the joke on Super Friends. I think that that's what people know. In mainstream, outside of comic books, Aquaman's a joke. He's a joke. I don't think I'm pulling back
a full season of Entourage on making fun of Aquaman and mocking the improbability of a blockbuster James Cameron directed Aquaman movie.
That leads me to my second point. Water movies is bad. Outside of Abyss, you're going to be hard pressed to find a successful Aqua movie.
I'm sorry. I have to interrupt you. The Abyss was a economic failure. It did not do well.
And
it found an audience on video.
It's a cult favorite, but was a gigantic bomb. Those are two huge strikes against that film.
Well, and then you've got Waterworld, which didn't flop as badly as people think because it did well internationally, but in the United States was a big flop. It didn't do well enough for them to ever try to do a sequel or anything. It's not like China was coming into the market and helping to bring out a sequel.
The most recent water movie that was a success, can you name it?
The Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Wrong. Sharknado. It's Sharknado, and you're about to nod your freaking head at me. It's totally Sharknado, the terrible sci-fi movie with Ian Ziering.
But it's a pop cult hit, but that's not like a motion picture,
That's what I'm saying. It's because it's so bad, it's kind of good. It's a let's sit around and eat popcorn and watch Plan 9 from Outer Space, Ed Wood, right? It's Ed Wood bad. That's what people are going to connect to sharks on a screen in water. You can't have an Aquaman movie without giant squids. You can't have an Aquaman movie without sharks. And that's what people are going to think. And you can have fucking homeboy from Game of Thrones, Jason Momoa. He's going to be up there looking super badass. And it's going to have sharks in the water. And it's going to say Aquaman. And look, I'm an Iron Man fan. I have no bones about how bad Iron Man comics have been. No problem. Admitting it in a second. If you say, oh, I never got an Iron Man because he's super fucking lame. He's just a dude in a suit. I go, you know what? I agree. That's how a lot of people see it. Third tier. I wouldn't even say second tier. He's a third tier Marvel character. But if you try to tell me Iron Man wouldn't translate successfully to film, you're out of your fucking mind. Because his name is Iron Man. Badass. What are we associating Iron Man with? Quintathlons or whatever those fucking people do. There's nothing negative associated with the name Iron Man. You can reset that. It can be fucking awesome. And two, technology and CGI. It's fucking built for it. Water ain't. End of story. I'm sorry. And I'm not saying it's not going to be I'm telling you, it could be fucking Citizen Kane underwater. It could end up being the best movie ever. Picture you're a normal person sitting in a theater. Picture a 300 style, that 300 kind of filmed Sin City film looking gritty.
Or even if it looks like Gravity, which also had a lot of those zero-grav effects.
No, just listen. Yeah. Just put your head there. You're in the theater. You're seeing a 300 style. You're seeing armies. You're seeing warriors. So it's kind of underwater. You can't really tell, right? There are castles and shit like that. And it's all gritty and dark. And you show Jason Momoa with the trident in his hand over his head. Now picture it two different ways. One with the word Namor, son of Atlantis, some shit like that. Submariner, son of Atlantis, or king of Atlantis, something fucking crazy like that. And then to have that exact same trailer and have it say Aquaman. I'm telling you,
I can't fight that. And honestly, again, it's the same problem that I have with the Wonder Woman movie. When you mention the name Wonder Woman, people picture a lasso. They picture the red and blue costume and gold. You remember when they did the Adrienne Palicki series a while back? People got really up in arms because she was wearing pants and because she looked too pleathery. And she's wearing a costume that's much more faithful to the Wonder Woman that most people recognize than the Xena outfit that she's wearing in the promotional image with Gal Gadot. With Aquaman, when you say Aquaman, people saw the 60s cartoon. People saw Super Friends. People have expectations of what that character is going to look like. And I think once again, Warner Brothers is going to run screaming from the popular conception of who Aquaman is. And they they did an episode of the Fire and Water podcast where they discussed how you see Jason Momoa as Aquaman, you're going to see, wow, Aquaman's a badass. And I disagree. What I think is going to happen is they're going to look at Jason Momoa, they're going to see the name Aquaman, and they're going to wonder why he doesn't look like the Aquaman that they know from the cartoons. They're not going to recognize him, just like they didn't recognize Ryan Reynolds as Green Lantern, because they had spent the last decade seeing Jon Stewart, a black guy in that costume. Well, if you have a half-naked guy who looks like a barbarian and you say that's Aquaman, and these are people who saw Entourage, these are people who saw all those cartoon shows over the years, even if you watch the Aquaman in Justice League, he's not going to have the hook. Everybody's going to be like waiting for him to have the harpoon hand. He's never going to have it in the movies. I think that you're just setting people up because there are certain expectations that come with Aquaman, and while you can see the virtue in trying to dash those expectations by casting against type, I think by casting against type, they're just creating an opportunity for dissonance. What people are expecting and what they're going to get, the people who like Aquaman, who aren't reading the modern comic books, aren't necessarily going to gravitate to that character as presented on the screen. I don't think they're going to recognize Aquaman in Jason Momoa.
What you're saying is they're going to alienate everybody.
I think they're going to alienate a lot of Aquaman fans because they're not going to produce the movie that people would expect from Aquaman. I'm an Aquaman fan. That's the reason why I read the Aquaman Shrine blog, and which led me to listen to the Fire and Water podcast in the first place. I like Aquaman. My problem is they're emphasizing elements that I don't necessarily associate with Aquaman. They're emphasizing elements that remind me more of Namor. I'm seeing a Namor movie being made with Aquaman supporting cast. It's like you said, that we haven't had a lot of success with water movies, and I'm not getting a version of Aquaman that I find appealing because Namor is a gangster. Namor is a guy who kills people and messes with the girlfriends and wives of other heroes. He's a big badass jerk type character. Where Aquaman, to me, he should be the nice guy. I don't think you emphasize strength or violence with that character. I think you have to emphasize agility. He's lithe. He moves in water. He thinks and fights in 3 dimensions. I think Aquaman should be more of a Spider-Man type character, where when you just have him just being brutal and fierce and strong and he's stabbing people with a trident, that's Namor. So when you put Jason Momoa in a movie and you try to tell me that's Aquaman, and it's clearly, he himself has promoted the Peter David Aquaman, which was still basically Namor. I'm not getting the Aquaman movie I want. I'm not getting the Namor movie I want.
So,
I'm getting this weird hybrid thing that turns me off. I still want to see an Aquaman movie. Until the announcement of the director for the Wonder Woman movie, Aquaman was the movie out of that slate that I was among the most enthusiastic about. I still want to see an Aquaman movie. I still want it to be good. I am rooting for it. But I also agree with you that it has a lot of problems ahead for it, and I don't think I'm going to get the Aquaman movie I want to see because it seems like they're going to focus on the Jeff Johns run, and I'm one of the people who dropped that run because even though the art was very pretty, I don't recognize that character as Aquaman. It's not the version of Aquaman that I find interesting, that I want to read about, that I want to talk about.
So here's the deal. I don't want an Aquaman movie to fail. I want all of these comic movies to succeed.
Well, I want them to be good.
It's good for the greater good. They need to be good movies and succeed. Yeah. I'm just saying, that one's going to have a tough time. As someone who's not I'm as familiar with Aquaman as everybody else who's sitting in that theater. They're not Aquaman
You're
fans.
More familiar, I think, than a lot of the people who are sitting in that theater.
Maybe, I guess. I don't know.
And those people did not go to see The Abyss. They did not go to see Waterworld. They saw Pirates of the Caribbean because Johnny Depp was acting goofy and it was kind of funny, and all those movies take place on ships for the most part anyway. They don't go to see water movies. Little Mermaid, Jaws.
The only hope is that they do some serious crossplay with Batman and Superman. Like, it needs to be Aquaman co-starring Superman.
They're selling an Aquaman animated movie as Justice League Throne of Atlantis, where they're pushing the aspect of the Justice League are going to be in this movie, and by the way, Aquaman, who is essentially the star, we're going to downplay that aspect until you actually watch the movie.
I think they need to do that, and then if it's successful, then you can do then that would lend credibility to a second movie that can be more Aquaman-centric.
Yeah.
I just think I'm telling you, as somebody who doesn't know a lot about the character, who can view it more as an outside the comic book, I'm telling you.
I wish Rob well in terms of this adaptation of a character he loves. I suspect that once it actually hits the screen, it's going to hurt his heart because I don't think he's going to get the Aquaman that he loves and recognizes. I think he's going to get the antithesis of that, the Peter David Aquaman.
I'll tell you this. If in the trailer they have a bunch of dudes holding Aquaman down and they chop his hand off and replace it with a hook, I'd be like, okay.
And I would hate that.
I don't
want to see that.
I know.
Yeah.
That's going to be the only thing. If you just have him up there standing around with a trident, I'm going to be like, whatever. If you showed his hand get butchered off, someone would be like, oh, damn, maybe I do need to go see this movie. But again, they're going to have to go so far with it that way that it's going to piss off everybody else. It seems like it's a lose-lose to me. But hey, best of luck.
I would just be much more excited if I were going to get an actual Aquaman movie instead of this weird hybrid thing that I'm expecting.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I don't know. I haven't seen production art. I don't know where they're going to go with it necessarily. We'll have to
So
just
he
wait
could
and
be
see.
hooked hand? Do we think he could be hooked hand?
I doubt that very seriously. Why would you go and get a guy like Jason Momoa if you're going to CGI a freaking dumbass harpoon? And I'm sorry, the harpoon was stupid looking anyway. I hate that concept. Honestly, that's when I was buying Aquaman comic, I got into that character because of Peter David. I loved his work on Incredible Hulk. I wanted to get in on the ground floor when he took over that book. I read a bunch of Aquaman comics before Peter David come on, and I realized that Peter David was ruining the character almost immediately. I don't even want to get into the circumstances under which he lost that hand. It is so stupid. So it's hard for me to divorce the stupid
I vaguely remember you explaining this to me when it happened at the shop.
A villain stole his powers and then forced his hand into a pool of water filled with piranhas. And he commanded the piranhas to eat Aquaman's hand. Aquaman talks to fish, and he loses a hand because of the one instance where he couldn't talk to fish. And also, how the fuck do you hold a man's arm in a pool of piranhas and it gets eaten off before he can fight you off? What kind of hero allows that to happen to himself? It's one thing when somebody, like you said, like holds you down and chops your hand off, or it's just this sudden action like a lightsaber takes your hand off in the midst of a combat. The guy grabbed the other guy's arm and pushed it into a puddle of water. He had to bring him down to his knees to get to the puddle of water full of piranhas. It is the stupidest thing.
Aquaman. Okay, we're done with that. All right, next.
So let's discuss the pacing on the show.
Anyway, hey, go in the comments and convince me. Do it. Go in the comments and convince me that. I mean, I could be totally off base. I could totally be off base. I'm just telling you. Our next part of Shag's comment says, Operation. During the editing, it sounds like natural.
Whoa, we read it.
Okay, yeah. I know. I'm just giving a refresher because now this was a long time ago. So he's talking about how some of the editing, and I have complained about this to Frank too, but I see what he's doing also. Sometimes he edits it so tight that it kind of jars the cadence to what I described as almost max headroom levels.
Well, the show is already designed like a
Where it sounds like you put the sentence together with a soundboard. Yeah. Right. So I agree. He needs to stop doing that. He needs to leave some ums and pauses in to make the conversation flow a little natural.
Well, and I'm also taking out the many instances of like, kinda, all that stuff that gets very irritating when you hear it 5 times in a minute span.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I think that we all have ADD. So all of these podcasts for him are like he's having to travel through time and grab portions and pull them back to where they make sense. So it's because we'll ramble for like hours, and then he has to edit this all together into a short snippet. Trust me, what you're hearing is much better than the alternative, but we're getting better. So I can see that you were jumping around through some old episodes. I think in some of the other some episodes it was pretty bad, but that was also because we were overcoming technological issues too.
Yeah. Well, and actually, Shag helped us out a lot by recommending the Levelator app that allows us to kind of sort of smooth off some of the rough edges on some of that material.
Well, we had mics that we did an Empire podcast with that weren't working. We just terrible, horrible stuff that we've gotten a little bit better with. So I think that you're going to find just naturally, as we get better at talking into microphones, we're not going to say stuff like stuff like stuff so much. Dead pause for 45 seconds in it. Or he'll just get better at editing it so it doesn't sound like we are so terrible.
Well, that, and I've been precious with the editing at times because I like the show to have that fast pace. When I say less max headroom, more blipvert, I appreciate that most podcasts you can put on and make background noise at work and help you get through your day. And if you tune out for 30 seconds or a minute, you're not going to miss out on very much. But one of the things I like about our podcast is it's very aggressive. We curse, we're passionate, we're often angry, we demand your attention. We don't want you to be listening to us passively. We want to grab you by the ears and drag you into our conversation. And the editing is very aggressive. Sometimes it is smash editing of a sort. And I like that about it. I think that gives us an identity that's different from all the other podcasts. And honestly, and I've gotten this feedback from other people, for some people, this is the only comic book podcast they listen to because they find so many other podcasts slow moving and tedious and plotting. And these guys have congratulated us on keeping up that adrenalized pacing. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. I do want to have the opportunity for the show to breathe more, and I would like to not have to spend as much time as I do editing. But at the same time, I've found that the fast episodes, the ones that are really coming at you with a lot of information and a lot of emotion and a lot of thought, at a rapid pace, are much more engaging. They keep my attention. And if I can listen to these episodes dozens of times over the course of editing, dozens, I don't even qualify, hundreds of times sometimes over the course of editing, and then I can still go back and listen to that episode a few months later and enjoy it, I think that we've done a good job. And I think that that's a big part of our identity. So I want to find a better balance. I want to make sure that we're appeasing as many people who are listening as possible, but it is part of who we are. We're always going to be propulsive, and we're never going to be a show that you can just listen to passively without losing a big chunk of information and content. You're going to get lost if you don't pay attention to us.
Yeah.
And we want it that way.
I just want to check, I have said this, right? I've brought this up.
Yes, you brought this up. I'm aware that sometimes
sometimes it's like, I can't even make out what the sentence was because it got edited. So we are absolutely, if that's the kind of specific sense you're talking about, we are trying to get away from that. But we do want to make sure we kind of keep our episodes concise, quick. And I think, like I said, I think naturally as we get more used to speaking into microphones and being more cognizant of timelines, or like, okay, this is the beginning of the podcast, let's not jump to the end of the comic book. We'll get better with that too. We're total noobs at this. So, we're getting there. We're getting there. But I think all of his criticism was sound, and it's stuff that we need to consider while we're doing it.
And also, one thing I like too is I've been a pain in the ass to the Fire and Water podcast from the beginning. I've been the guy who trolls or comment sections, and I appreciate.
It's been like that for my life. You've been like that for my life too. So I give Shag candor, and I appreciate Shag's candor. So, and if it makes the show better, all to the good. Yeah, for sure.
We're not going to talk about Alpha Flight anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'd rather do Excalibur.
We're not going to talk about Excalibur anytime soon.
I had a friend of mine growing up who was British, okay? And one of the only comic books he collected was fucking Excalibur. And who drew those? Who drew that stuff?
Alan Davis did most of the early issues.
I remember flipping that stuff. I thought it all looked really good. And you had Kitty Pryde and Captain Britain's all of his costumes look badass. I thought it was a good looking book. It was a good looking team. You had Lockheed, Nightcrawler, right? Was Nightcrawler in there?
Yeah, he was in there.
I'm telling you, I'm naming all good stuff.
No more mutants.
I know. But I'm just saying, if we're going to do mutants, I want to do Marvel UK off-the-wall mutants. I feel like...
Actually, if we do mutants, I'm going to go to my sweet spot. Shag likes to talk a lot about finding your comic's joy, where instead of muddling through a bunch of crappy material that you don't care about and you don't want to read because you feel some sense of fidelity to a property, to just go and find the stuff that you enjoy and read that. So if we cover mutants, we're going to go to John Byrne, Paul Smith, or John Romita Jr. X-Men. The good stuff, the pure stuff, maybe some Cockrum. But did
he know we were going to cover Black Widow? Is that why he said that?
What are you talking about, Black Widow?
Find our comics joy. Don't read stuff that we don't want to
right.
read. Just jump,
no kidding,
just jump to the stuff we like.
Jump to the stuff we like. We like Black Widow. We just hate her early appearances. But yeah, no, if we're going to do X-Men, let's do the good shit. The really prime stuff. Huh?
If we're going to do Black Widow, let's do the good shit.
You're trying to... Are you going to make this the Black Widow? Am I going to have to run the Black Widow one with this letter?
No, you can edit all this.
Okay. Yeah, but we're not doing Alpha Flight anytime soon. We're not doing Excalibur anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to.
There are so many things that I would want to touch on before. Literally all the things, virtually all the things. There's very little lower on my list of priorities than Alpha Flight.
Red Wolf.
Red Wolf would come out before Alpha Flight.
Death's Head.
Absolutely, I loved some Death's Head. And Dragon's Claws.
Yeah, some weird shit.
Actually, I enjoyed the Marvel
Motor
Mouth. Yeah, no, I read the Marvel UK. They did the Revolutionary War event, which was sort of annihilation for their Marvel UK properties. And I don't know if people who didn't read those properties 20 years ago would appreciate them, but I enjoyed that.
Who did Death's Head fight in that?
Wait, what do you mean? In the Revolutionary War story?
Yeah. Who was his main crossover with? Am I not remembering this correctly?
He fought the X-Men all the time.
Did he?
Are you talking about Death's Head 2?
Maybe Death said too.
I think you're thinking of that too. He was constantly fighting the X-Men and being drawn by Liam Sharp in the early issues.
Liam Sharp's badass.
Yeah, he was constantly fighting guest stars because the entire line was kept afloat by having guest stars appear for no good reason.
I think all of Marvel was kept afloat by just crossing X-Men into it for a while.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Especially once the Image guys left.
That's a depressing note to end this on. Have any more?
Don't worry, Aqua fans. Our Aquaman conversation will continue into the Mighty Marvel mailbag. But first, our newest Twitter follower is Between the Pages. Twitter favorites came from Abel Padzia, Ange, The Aquaman Shrine, Carlos Satanas, Charlton Hero, Chris William, CJ, Comic Geek Speak, Count Druncula, Crusaders, David Fior, Eel Perrin, Eternal Rage, Future Primitive, Captain Kringle, Knowing Flame Comics, Kyle Benning, Lawrence Kinkisart, Oscar Olalde, Plug-In Podcast, Professor Riptide, Siskoid, Sin, and WordPress News. Retweets were provided by Charlton Hero, CJ, Count Druncula, Crusaders, Eternal Rage, Future Primitive, Knowing Flame Comics, Martin Gray, Professor Riptide, and Randy Caldwell. All right, let's dig into this one. We received a manifesto from Kyle Benning. We're both fans of the Fire and Water podcast. I'm usually known for writing very long comments, and Kyle's doing his best to one-up me. He writes, I'm now all caught up after binge listening to all the back episodes. I love the podcast. It's a great format and unique in the way that all three of you have very distinct and different characters and eras that you've followed, resulting in bringing three unique perspectives to each topic. I can't think of another podcast that offers that perspective diversity. While I agree with a lot of your opinions on story arcs and characters, you guys are so wrong about not liking Namor. He should be the single most popular character in the Marvel Universe. Think about it. He's been around the longest, he is one of the strongest, capable of going toe-to-toe with the Hulk, and is the most diverse. Nazi-crushing invader, king of Atlantis, enemy, ally, villain, hero, businessman, mutant. He is more diverse than any other in the Marvel Universe, and is one of the few who actually changes and develops as time progresses. Usual detractors for Namor go for a one-dimensional attack on why they don't like the character, that he's an asshole. No, he's a super strong, super intelligent being who just really doesn't have any patience for worthless morons. I don't know any of your employment backgrounds, but being frustrated by incompetent morons is definitely something I can relate to on a day-to-day basis. If comic fans claim they don't like the occasional jerk in their comics as a protagonist, they're liars. If that's the case, DC would be out of business. Think about it. Namor is intelligent, cold, standoffish, thinks he is always right, and doesn't play well with others. Sound familiar? Yeah, that's what DC has done with Batman, the character they stick in 15 books and tout as their most popular character. Namor is Batman with superpowers and a responsibility of protecting 75% of the world instead of a single shit-infested city. Namor has been associated with the Fantastic Four over the years as a sometimes ally, sometimes foil. The Fantastic Four is my favorite comic team, so I've always enjoyed when he shows up there. But since Mac hates the Fantastic Four, he should look into all the times Namor teams up with or battles Iron Man. I love those adventures from the Silver and Bronze Age. The two characters have a rich tradition of crossing paths, and it is always awesome. I really wish they'd revisit that dynamic more often in the current comics. On your most recent episode, it's too bad this Ronin mini sucks so hard. I have always really dug the character. He has such an awesome costume design and is so badass. It's too bad Furman, who I really loved on Transformers, delivered such a turd story. It was cool seeing him in Guardians this summer, but he was a little one-dimensional. I would have liked to see him fleshed out a little bit more and played by a buffer actor. The actor was just a bit too skinny in my opinion. Ronan came off as a little too lanky and not as physically imposing as he could have. Great podcast. I really enjoyed it so far, and I hope you guys revisit some of the Marvel Superheroes cartoon episodes again in the near future. Kyle Benning of the Legion of Super Bloggers and King Size Comics Giant Size Fun podcast. First off, Kyle, thank you very much for the compliments. Second, I don't recall anybody ever saying they didn't like Namor. I think all three of us like Namor. I definitely do. And I'm the one who pushed to have a Namor episode from the early days of the podcast and to watch the cartoons. They weren't good shows, but I like the character, and I definitely want to explore the character again. If Marvel ever up and decides to have me come on as a writer, I've already got my Namor pitch in mind. I didn't really mind Lee Pace as Ronan. I think he did a solid job for what he had to work with, but he didn't really have a lot to work with. It would have been nice to have had a more physically imposing figure under that costume, but the costume was doing most of the work anyway. And as far as the cartoons, we're definitely going to revisit those. Later, Kyle and Mac decided to have a nice little Twitter argument regarding Namor and Aquaman. Kyle made a point of mentioning that in January 2012, Aquaman outsold every Marvel title on the stands, which prompted Mac to note that it's a lot less impressive to do that in 2012 than it would have been in 1990, 1992. Kyle also mentioned that Aquaman has crossed over into television like Smallville and had a successful presence there. I think the heart of Kyle's argument was that the comic book creators have figured out how to sell Aquaman to comic book fans, and that using that as a template, they could probably transition that to film. Mac's point was that selling 60,000 copies of an Aquaman comic in 2012 isn't that big of a deal, that it doesn't indicate real penetration of an audience. And I would tend to agree that comic book readers today are much more niche than they were in the 90s. You got a lot of graying, nostalgic fellows who are going to be more inclined to appreciate an Aquaman as this figure from their childhood, as this icon across decades. And that doesn't resonate with a regular audience, with plain folk, the way somebody like Deadpool, who I think is a horrible character. I hate Deadpool, but he came out of that period in the 90s. And there are people who were fans of comics that have long left the field who know who Deadpool is thanks to those millions of copies of X-Force sold, who do enjoy that violence and that sarcasm. And I'm pretty sure if they have a Deadpool movie come out, it'll probably do better than the Aquaman movie. But ultimately, I take issue with both of their arguments because I think it all depends on how the character is presented on screen. I do think that an underwater hero is a tough sell. I also think that the changes made to Aquaman and the way Aquaman is being presented now in the comics will probably be stronger than a lot of previous representations. At the same time, I don't see how Jason Momoa really fits with the John Reese Aquaman template. And I can't help but assume that there's going to be some Peter David and some Namor in the mix. So for now, this is just a lot of speculation. I don't think you can prove that Aquaman is going to work for audiences until a movie comes out that presents them with an Aquaman character. I'll also say that any of you Aquaman fans who are mad at Mac, no matter what you could have possibly said to him to retaliate, let me assure you that my plugging in a Bare Naked Lady song into our podcast is much more offensive to Mac's sensibilities than anything anybody could have possibly hurled at him. Moving right along, Sin complimented us by putting us in his hashtag FF Follow Friday, which he also associated with the Fantastic Four. He had us standing alongside Black Canary Fan, Bronze Age Babies, and Mystery Vlog. And a nice little piece of art that went with that. You can see that up on the blog. Professor X at X Aspirations, another podcaster, said, all shucks, thanks for listening, and appreciated being associated with him on another Follow Friday type event. We have a new listener named Darcy who commented on several of our past episodes, starting with number 12, Beware the Claws of the Cat. She writes, hi guys, very insightful comments on the cat numbers 1 and 2. Since you haven't read number 3, I'll just say it repeats all the failings of number 2. The story promised at the end of number 3 was the one penciled by Ramona Fradon, which was never published. I hadn't read that Starlin and Weiss produced the replacement number 4 issue in 2 days, but it's obvious it was a rush job. FYI, Mal Donalbain's name is an allusion to Macbeth. The murdered King Duncan's 2 sons were Malcolm and Donald, known as Donalbain, that is, Donald the Fair. Keep up the good work. That's a high-minded reference there, and us plebeians would not have caught that without her help. Darcy also said of episode 15, Tigra the Were-Woman, Roy had a lot to do with the development of Tigra. In the article Tigra's Year in GSC number 1, Tony was going to call the Were-Cat character Hellcat. He was bouncing ideas off Duffy Volan, and they simultaneously came up with the idea that she was Greer. Tony took his ideas to Roy, who substituted the name Tigra, suggested Hydra as the villains, and gave him the slot in what should have been Giant-Sized Werewolf number 1. By the way, the remainder of that issue is largely taken up by a Reed Candle Werewolf, Not Werewolf by Night story, reprinted from Creatures on the Loose number 13. What if Crandall had provided the art instead of Perlin Coletta? I found the art for Tigra the Were-Woman singularly flat. It appears the only way to get to the Baja California cave is from the beach, so I think Dr. Tomolo had to change Greer out of her cat uniform and into that black bikini to get her from the airport to the cat people's sanctuary. The alpha radiation poisoning was slow-acting, so Greer could still dress herself. You'd think Hydra would have been interested in Dr. Tomolo's experiment, wouldn't you? Even if it only worked on women, it seems a lot more interesting than run-of-the-mill Black Death. That's right, the Serenity Stealers is a twisted tale. Tiger would get back to what Tony intended when she appeared next in Marvel Chillers number 3 through 7. Thanks. Again, excellent information. I would have loved to have seen Reed Crandall do the Giant-Sized Werewolf by Night story with Tigra. Crandall is one of the greats of the Golden Age. I was a fan of his work on Thunder Agents, especially on the No Man feature. Plus, he had a fantastic run on Black Hawk back in the day. Darcy said of episode 17, To Hell with Mockingbird, take a close look at part 16 of Marvel Premiere number 42. Greer Garson, I wonder if this was in Warner and Hannigan's script or if it's a mistake by John Costanza, who would be the letterer. Mockingbird has been a favorite character of mine for a long time. One of the few good things to come from Secret Invasion was her return. I was disappointed when she was given the combination Super Soldier Infinity Serum in New Avengers. I wonder if her story will change again now that Original Sin has revealed the Infinity Formula wasn't what we thought it was. Thanks. Anyway, great comments from Darcy. Great to have you around. I believe that Max sent me a text message when your comments first appearing talking about how badass they were. So, good job. Charlton Hero writes, the Howard the Duck episode may have been my favorite so far. Love how you guys included discussion on early posters and trailers. In a recent episode, Mac and I were kind of running down Colby Smulders and her portrayal of Maria Hill in Avengers and Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. CJ wrote in, hashtag Sherbatsky can be my wingman anytime. Hashtag Himium, referring to her character from How I Met Your Mother. And he included a little piece of art, which we've got up on the blog. CJ also says, of episode 23, I agree that most of the minis from Annihilation didn't leave a lasting impression on me. Good ep, guys. Jason Martinez let us know that he's listening to the Annihilation Ronin episode. Eternal Rage wrote of it, I'm going to have to reread this. I don't remember it being that bad. I do remember the art being great, but story is sketchy. And having done so, he wrote, not much to argue about on this one. It was subpar in the script department, but good to look at art. Let's do this, mang. Count Druncula writes, Simon Furman is much beloved among fans of the Transformers comic, but this story was lackluster to put it kindly. That said, Ronan the Accuser is probably my favorite character from Marvel's Cosmic Realm. I think Lee Pace was miscast as Ronan in Guardians of the Galaxy, but more than that, the makeup job on his face made his lips look fat and pouty like he was crying the whole movie. I couldn't take him seriously. I've said it elsewhere, but I'll repeat it here. Michael Shannon's General Zod was a better Ronan the Accuser than the one in GOTG. Ange writes, thanks for another great episode. Like you guys, I think Ronan is a great character in concept. The look, the big hammer, the name, it is all so cool. But despite my love of his appearance and name, I can't name one story that I know where he lives up to the trappings. And luckily, based on your review, I didn't read this one to further the trend. The rundown of Skrull and Kree history was interesting. I collected the Peter David Captain Marvel, the second run with Chris Cross on art, and had run across the Kree in various FF, Avengers, crossover stuff. So thanks for the background. That Kree Supreme Intelligence floating head with tentacles is such a bizarre image. Lastly, I agree that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was pretty lackluster until it synced up with the Cap 2 movie. Once the Hydra S.H.I.E.L.D. war took center stage, things have taken off, and this season has been great. I agree that Mockingbird is fantastic on the show. She is tough and kicks the crap out of people. She's a brilliant interrogator. She is shown getting under the skin of whoever she is questioning. She doesn't use feminine wiles or feigned emotionality to get the info. She just browbeats people. And of course, it is Adrian Palicki. I love her. But the most brilliant character on the show is Ward, the embedded Hydra agent on the team who remains on the show as a foil villain. He is crazy and obsessed with Skye and adds a nice element of lunacy. Siscord closes out by stating, another Annihilation series to skip, eh? You presumably saved me $1.
The Marvel Superheroes podcast is in no way affiliated with or endorsed by Marvel Entertainment. All characters mentioned and audio clips employed are believed covered under fair use, with no infringement intended against their copyright holders. The views expressed in this podcast are assumed legitimate, truthful, and solely possessed by the speaker.
It's a really good movie. I mean, he is not a nice person in the movie.
Have you kept up with the Fast and Furious movies, by the way?
Yeah.
Did you see the trailer to Furious 7?
No, I haven't seen it.
That's like I'm not as into The Rock in those movies, but I enjoy those the last few movies.
I like the movies better with him in them.
Oh yeah,
because he's Roadblock. He's what he should have been in G.I. Joe in those movies.
Yeah,
that badass fighter.
I want to see it. Did you see the trailer for the 7th one?
No, we'll have to watch it. We'll have to watch it.
It looks fucking.
Now you do realize
it's so ridiculous, but it looks awesome.
You do realize they're saying this is what 7, right?
Yeah,
they got 10 of them. They want to make 10 of them.
That's fine. So as long as they're as good as the last few, I'm down. Even 4 was okay. 5 and 6 were really good, though.
I liked them all the way to the point where they found what's her name,
Michelle Rodriguez.
Yeah, Michelle Rodriguez. I thought that was.
But I want her back in the franchise.
But the way they explained it, like, oh, she got blown away from the vehicle.
But
amnesia.
Yeah, if you watch, dude, if you watch the 4th movie, though,
she couldn't remember how to drive a car like a motherfucker, but she couldn't remember her fucking name.
Motor memory. No, you keep motor memory as amnesiac. But the thing is, if you watch the 4th movie, it was not a convincing death anyway.
Was it?
It was never
honestly
convincing.
Never seen the 4th one.
Well, you have to see the
first one. Second was god awful.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Which one's Tokyo Drift?
That's the one with the Lucas Black, the Southern kid in Japan.
That's the third one.
Yeah,
that was pretty.
I like that one a lot. Yeah.
I like that one because that's when you start getting the group together. That's
no, it's really the 4th one. That's when when they bring everybody back together again.
The 4th one has nobody from the other movies, or the third one. The third one has none of them. Tokyo Drift has got nobody from any of the movies except Vin Diesel at the very end.
Well,
but that's where you introduce the. But okay, let me ask you. On the third one, the Asian character that pops up in Vin Diesel's gang, didn't he get killed in the third one?
No.
Let me tell you the number.
That's where I got.
These are the Fast and Furious movies I've seen. 1.
You saw Tokyo Drift.
3. And Point Break, which was a prequel.
True. Tokyo Drift takes place after Fast and Furious 6. There's continuity in those movies. And the Asian character that appeared in the 3rd movie, who dies at the end of the 3rd movie, he appears in 4, 5, and 6. And at the stinger for 6, he's killed by Jason Statham's character. Yeah. So that's where they're going to pick up. The 3rd movie is going to take place after the 6th movie.
I'm going to fucking leave right now. If we keep talking about goddamn Fast and the Furious.
They're good, though, man.
And we don't start fucking watching motherfucking Howard the goddamn Duck.
We're almost there.
All right.
Okay.
So you say Matt's having a meltdown right now.
Okay.
I'm having a goddamn meltdown right now in this fucking couch.
Batman versus Superman versus Captain America Civil War.